Morning troops. So hello everybody. I'm making a little video to show you the flexibility of the Red Dragon R3D files that I have shot for the movie Warhol. I've shot them in a very particular way, having worked with the director a few times, so that there's full flexibility in the post-production before you then choose the codec that you will grade the film with. So for example, these are R3D files. This is a scene, part of a scene from the movie. It's currently sitting basically as I shot it, which you can see over here with the R3D metadata that I shot it at 250 ISO, which as you know is pretty much a stop and a half under the 800 ISO, which the Red RAW sensor operates at. I did that very deliberately because most RAW sensors, and especially Red sensors, seem to have a nicer finish, a nicer texture, less digital noise if you overexpose the sensor when you're doing dark scenes. So if you look over here at the histogram, you'll notice that it's very much towards the left, which is saying that it's a darker scene. And you can see here on the waveform that everything is quite low down. You know, everything's towards the darker end of things at 250 ISO. Now, here's the wonderful thing about R3D files. This is not a codec. This is not a digital file that has the ISO and the color temperature and the contrast levels baked in as soon as you press record and stop. It's metadata. So you can play with, you can adjust, you can change the texture, the color, the finish, the contrast, days, weeks and months and years after you finish shooting, before you then decide on how your film is going to look when it's finished. And I'm just going to give you a few examples right here. So as I say, it was shot at 250 ISO, and this is how we metered with our lightings. We took our fill lights, our background lights, our practical lights, and we exposed them in accordance with what I decided was nice for this particular scene at a 250 ISO. Now, if I was to chuck that up, oh, and also we're keeping it at low contrast as well, so we got like a very subtle kind of David Fincher, Mindhunter kind of feel to it in regards to the contrast levels. Now, if I was to take this all the way up to 800, you'll see what happens. It's a totally different scene. It's a totally different scene. But what you can do here, and this is where things start to get really interesting, is if you go up to medium contrast, you can see that the blacks are blacker, the highlights have popped up a little bit. Take it to high contrast, the blacks have been crunched even more, the highlights have come up, things are looking a little bit, a bit brighter. So you've got a soft highlight roll off here. If I go hard on the highlight roll off, you'll just see, look at that. See, look how much color saturation, and the highlights have popped as well. So that he now looks too warm, one would say. So you can go over to the color balance over here, and instead of being at 5600, which is obviously double warm for a tungsten light, let's say we halved that and went to 43. There you go. The skin tones come down, the blues pop because you've added more blue, and you've got a kind of a totally different look to where we started. And this is metadata. So again, none of this is baked in. This is all playful. You can experiment. You have a little look at things. Now when you go up into image primary, you have a reset button here for the whole thing. You can go into each individual section here and reset to the metadata. So if I was to go up to primary and reset the metadata, it will go back to what it was at the beginning. Okay? Your hard contrast, you can set that back to low contrast and soft roll off. 5600 has been back. So here we go, back to our nice and soft starting rate. Okay? So this is how you can do things so easily. Even if you were to pop it up to say 500, well maybe 400, and change the low contrast to a medium contrast, change the soft roll off to a medium soft. What you've got is a little bit of extra contrast on the key. Just pops him out a little bit. You've got a little bit of extra contrast in the hair. Again, you could cool this down, maybe take it from 56 to, let's go to 5,000, you know, and then you've just taken a little bit of the warmth out. So also, you can also click in here and see what it looks like in its original red log film settings. Now, again, that's also adjustable, right? So when you decide what you want, you switch back to log and you export, you transcode, whatever. But what I wanted to show here is most definitely how the image itself can be adjusted before you decide on the final look. So I personally think it's a nice place to start with the low contrast, the soft roll off, and then here you can see how far you want to go with adjustments. You can go down to 4000 ISO, gets a lot colder. I mean, it's wonderful. Also, I'm replaying this quite low bit rate because obviously 5K at 5:1 compression is around about 1000 megabits a second. They're very large files, and my little laptop, my 2015, 2016 MacBook Pro, doesn't have the processing speed or the graphics card speed to replay 5K, 6K files at high speed. So as you can see up here, I've dropped it down to an 8th bit rate kind of thing. And what's wonderful is like you can do this, you can check it out. You can like literally put it at any color you want. You can get it to as dark as you want. You know, all the way down. Low contrast, very soft. And every time you adjust the settings, the sequence bar here resets, and then it will reload the clip so you can watch it in your chosen settings. So saturation levels are in your CDL box. So obviously it's at 1 right now. You can knock it all out, knock it all up, boom, put them on the surface of the sun. But it's really interesting to do these kind of things. And then every time you adjust it, of course, the sequence resets. So let's have a quick look at, for example, let's go to 500 ISO. So we've increased the light levels by 2. We have doubled the ISO. We've now got twice as much light on the actor's face. Okay. If we then use contrast, from going from low contrast to high contrast, brings the darkness back, adds that little contrast level, and we'll go from soft to hard roll off. And look at the warmth that's come back in. So here's where it's kind of interesting to look at the saturation, take it down, you know, just a little bit. Even if you just go to like, you know, I think 8 is usually, 0.8 is usually a nice bit where you start to see a difference. See, that's totally changed now. So I'll just let this load up for a little while. So you can do this with literally anything, any file, like, and you can do this shot by shot once your edit is done. Once you've found your edit that you like, maybe your scene has 7 or 8 different shots all within this one area, or maybe you've gone into the studio at the back where these guys are hanging out, where they're lit by these nice blue and red colors, and there's a bit of smoky haze in there. Once you've got all your scene edited and you're locked with that scene with your proxies, you relink to the R3D files. And then once you relink to the R3D files, that's when you can really start to fine tune the color and feel and look of the scene. And this is metadata. So it's not a codec. It's not like a ProRes codec or a DNX or a Sony XAVC codec. Because as soon as you start to try and really change the codecs, it does affect the image. It can create digital noise if you try to brighten things. You know, you can lose quality in the midtones and the blacks when you try to darken things, because you're not darkening the metadata, you're darkening the actual codec, and you're brightening the codec. You're pushing something that doesn't want to be pushed too much. Whereas with the metadata, as I've shown, you know, you can go from 800 ISO down to like 160. So let's just replay this. I'm just going to play this for a little bit. right? So there we go. It'll push in, the colors are nice and warm, the contrast's all there, and then again, go back to where we started, 2500, sorry, 250 ISO, reset that to 1.0, full saturation. Don't use high contrast, use low contrast. Don't do hard roll off, do soft roll off. And there you go, you've got a completely different feel. I mean, even if you wanted to just try it, change the 56 to 43. Now it's a bit colder, it's a bit more New York style, that kind of thing. And you've got a completely different feel and look in seconds. And this is where you can play with it, and you don't butcher or you don't damage the codec at all, because it's raw, it's metadata. You can do this as many times as you like, before you then go to do your final output and your final grade and color. And you can be like, right, okay, do you know what? This scene, now that we've seen it edited, it feels like it should be a little colder, it should be a bit brighter, it should be this, it should be that. And that's why I love the raw R3D files of the red, because you can totally change your mind and you don't butcher the codec. You don't like add noise, you don't lose detail in the blacks. You can play with the contrast to such a degree that you can almost do you can pretty much do a high HDR or a high dynamic range pass using the R3D files. So anyway, quick movie. I'm going to watch this back, see if it makes sense. Bye!